eagle, kalingiting nagigil. Blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, katipunan.
Radyo Katipunan, 87.9 FM.
Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, 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 katipunan. The voice of W Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atenista sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, katipunero sugo. Todo sa kayod, tunong at tulong. Lipad na Blue Eagle, kalingiting at tigil. Blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan.
This is your stop for all things pop. Catch our all-around pop culture geek, Cholo Sediaren, as he throws in some dose of what's poppin' and what's hot in the pop culture scene here on Popcorn. Munchin' with us every Thursdays from 4 to 6, only here on Radyo Katipunan, 87.9 FM.
What's poppin', and welcome to Popcorn with Cholo Sadianan, your stop for all things pop, where we talk about all things pop culture from here in the Philippines to the rest of the globe. Welcome back to the Marvel Universe. As this week, we talk about the much anticipated episode, I guess, in this panel, which is Spider-Man No Way Home, the latest Spider-Man movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and in the greater Marvel Universe. But of course, before we begin, let's introduce our co-hosts for the day. Welcome back, Perns.
Hello.
Let's also welcome back Jace and Dren. It's been a while, guys.
Hi. Hello. I love Spider-Man.
Dren loves Spider-Man very much. Na ganun pa rin. Dren is not appearing right now, but that's the mystery of Dren as this show goes on. But of course, we have a very special guest today. Nakikita nyo naman, they're here with us.
Whoa.
It's an honor, sabi nga ni Ghostface. But we're not talking about Ghostface this week. Welcome, Spider Cola from the multiverse.
Wow! Oh my
Actually,
god!
Pietra Parker, you know.
Spider.
Oh, she had glasses too.
Yeah. Just came prepared, man.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
The multiverse.
So welcome everyone, and I know everyone's been excited for this episode for a while, and we've seen it in multiple ways that we could have seen it given all the circumstances. But we are here in our Spider-Man No Way Home spoiler fest. So warning, spoilers ahead, definitely for everyone who hasn't seen Spider-Man No Way Home yet. You may stop and then just rewatch this recording or listen back, and there will be spoilers ahead. And yeah, it's just gonna be talking about generally Spider-Man. So I guess to begin, this is marketed as the biggest Spider-Man movie and one of the biggest Marvel Cinematic Universe films, especially with the new Phase 4. Let's go back a bit. I don't know why, joke. We do know why, but like, let's go back a bit into our childhoods and tap into the original Spider-Man trilogy by Sam Raimi, and also, of course, the amazing Spider-Man movies by Mark Webb. And yeah, I mean, generally speaking, this is a third Spider-Man iteration na live action, not considering the Japanese TV version. So, ayun, just remembering like Spider-Man in general. Guys, take it away.
Ren, you
Oh.
you wanna take it?
Oh, such cry. Just such sobbing.
Pressure.
No, yeah, I really have a soft spot for Spider-Man. I think he's like my favorite superhero because when I was like 5 or 6 years old, my mom got me a Spider-Man pillow, and I still have it, and I still use it because it's like I just love him so much. And he was like, what's crazy about him, I think, that I'd like to talk about is that he's kind of been around for a long time, but Sam Raimi really put him on the big screen before superhero movies were ever really a thing, and they were like destroying box office records every single movie. Tobey Maguire was considered to be kind of the perfect Spider-Man, and I feel like that ending of his story wasn't very satisfying for a lot of fans. So to have him come back now in the third
Spoiler.
movie. Yes, sorry. I mean, Chol already said that you
Did I?
if you still haven't seen it, it's a miracle you've avoided all of the spoilers. So I commend you. But also, I'm so sorry that I might have just like ruined your streak of avoiding spoilers. But yeah, I think it wasn't satisfying the way it ended. And another spoiler: Andrew Garfield also comes back, and he also didn't really have a satisfying ending. So to have them come back now in this third movie, it's like a nerd's wet dream. It's something that you would think of as like a fan fiction. Honestly, it's crazy.
Honestly.
Something like this has never happened in the history of like cinema. To have three people who all played the same character in previous universes all come together in a blockbuster movie. They kind of did it a little bit in the DC world with the CW series where they had Barry Allen come back, but they didn't have that same level of impact because each of these Spider-Men were in their own separate universes. Whereas in the DC world, Grant Gustin's Barry Allen exists at the exact same time as what's his name? Ezra Miller's
Ezra Miller.
Flash. We all thought that, Tobey Maguire was never going to put on the suit and Andrew Garfield was never going to put on the suit again. It's like watching. I can't even think of an example. That's how crazy it is. So it's really like this momentous occasion. And I was so excited to watch it that I got my hands on a copy as soon as I could, and I just cried. So
I mean, you're right. I mean, to Dren's point, nothing of the scale. I mean, even more than Endgame. Na Endgame is the culmination of 10 years of cinema history, but this one is 20 years from 2002 to December of 2021. So parang that history that's not just within super fanboys, but even in a general scale na parang you've watched at least one of those Tobey Maguire ones or the Andrew Garfield ones or all of them. I mean, tayo, I guess we're in that prime position na we lived through all of that somehow. And this is a pleasant surprise to come into it. But I guess bouncing off of that, I did parang syempre the circumstances we found ourselves in with the release of Spider-Man No Way Home in the Philippines was not the most ideal. Coming off of December 2021 and January's Omicron extravaganza. But parang in lieu of not getting to see it as early as possible, I did get to rewatch everything from the beginning until the most recent, and it's just a nice way to look back then at what has come and how far things have progressed since then, and also what parang what continues to parang be good or be great even after all these years. So definitely it was a fun practice, which not you can't find that much time, I guess, if it's not the holidays. But seeing Spider-Man 2, 3, and all the Amazing Spider-Man movies, they're all on Netflix if you're looking to rewatch. Except actually even until Tom Holland Spider-Man,
Yeah.
except Far From
From
Home, it's
home.
on Netflix. So if you do want to do a Spider-Man binge, it's all there. But just to I mean, I agree na parang this was one of the few properties that we were holding on to when we were younger. One of them being X-Men and the other being Spider-Man as the big parang event movies. If
Yeah.
event movies were different that time, but yun yung parang these were the active heroes back then, and it's just nice to see them back again. So that's at least from my perspective, and also having had watched rewatched the movies. Although especially for the Amazing Spider-Man movies, I thought I liked them more than I actually did as I rewatch them now,
Okay.
which is kind of I don't know. Yung Tobey Maguire ones, they're still classics for sure, especially Spider-Man 2. And pero yun, Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man, I kind of felt a bit in the middle on that one. So I'm gonna pass it on to you guys next in terms of
Well, I
the
just
turnaround
want to jump
Spider-Man.
off that because my recollection of the Amazing Spider-Man films were pretty bad. I mean, as much as I love Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone and their dynamics as Peter and Gwen were fantastic. In my recollection, especially the second Amazing Spider-Man film, I remembered it to be pretty bad. But I had rewatched it again, and I think it really makes a difference when you watch something with someone who is like a super fan
Mhm.
of the material. And that's definitely my little brother who was like 3, 4 years old when the first Spider-Man film came out, and I have videos of him as a 4-year-old screaming, "I'm Spider-Man!" And it's just, it's one of those things. Spider-Man is the poster boy for Marvel and every little boy's hero growing up. So watching it with him, I saw just how many pros there are, or like how many good things there actually were in the Amazing Spider-Man films. The first and most important to me being the swinging action. No Spider-Man movie, even until now, like even with the latest one, no Spider-Man movie has done like swinging actions as well as the Amazing Spider-Man series has. Like the physicality that
Yeah.
Andrew Garfield and his like stunt team had done for that particular role was amazing. And I think what makes the original and the Amazing Spider-Man series like really heartwarming and made them super popular and made the character really loved by so many is the fact that the people of New York openly showcase their love for Spider-Man as well, which is something that I think has been missing from the MCU for the longest time. Spider-Man 2's iconic train scene, I think, comes to mind for most people. But in Amazing Spider-Man 1 as well, when the cranes were all like
Yeah.
fixed so that Peter could get to Lizard, I think showcases just how much Spider-Man's like good deeds, like one good deed for Spider-Man affects like so many people in the city of New York and makes them want to defend him. And that's what I love about Spider-Man is he's the people's champion talaga. He's a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and he makes New York feel like one whole neighborhood because he protects everybody. So yeah, I love Spider-Man. Like you said, like his history is just so great. Like not just in the films but in comics as well. Everybody he's the first comic you tend to pick up anyways because his story is always so intriguing. And I'm just happy that this latest iteration of Spider-Man feels like it does in the comics, where you kind of pick it up and all of these universes kind of like flood together, and that's so cool that we get to see it and have this shared like history with everybody as well. Or you could go to anybody, nga, like you said, Cholo, and they would know who Spider-Man is, have watched the Spider-Man film. And that kind of connection that you have with other people is so hard to come by, especially now with media being so vast. So Spider-Man and these popcorn films or pop culture films are really have an important place in how we interact with everybody. But that's
Rin
it.
ako sumunod? Okay. Um, no, I really love the original Spider-Man films. I remember watching. I don't really remember everything about the first three of the franchise, um, because I watched it so young. But recently, kasi I've been going through a YouTube parang dark hole of just Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone interviews and clips, and it's so heartbreaking because I really love them as a couple, and I think na Spider-Man really introduced us to very iconic love themes, and I also talked about this in parang a piece that I wrote. Pero Spider-Man really does have like a lot of the blockbuster like cinematic moments, like from Spider-Man, the original franchise, the train sequence, obviously, but also the upside down kiss. Like,
Oh, yeah.
who can forget that? Like, that's
Yep.
been parodied in so many other things, right? And even pati yung dun sa The Amazing Spider-Man, may mga ganung moments like when Andrew Garfield plays in this warehouse after he asks Gwen out, or when he pulls her clothes to
Oh,
disclose
yeah.
yung ano, diba? And so, ang daming ganong kind of, I guess, iconic ideas of like romance as well. I feel like we also forget na apart from being a coming of age film, which is what I think the MCU films lean into. Parang the original two parang boots of the franchise were really centered on romance, and that's why it's so heartbreaking that when, for example, Gwen dies in the Amazing
He
Spider-Man.
died?
previously,
Just
right?
kidding.
Spoiler.
Why'd you spoil me?
Spoiler for that one.
Pero yeah, I really do think na, and to just build off of what Paula said, I think that one of the best aspects about Spider-Man is that Spider-Man can be, in the words of like paraphrasing Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man can be anyone.
Anyone.
And that aspect of relatability is something that the first three films and the reboot na two films, even despite like having too many villains or whatever, they really had like their aspect of relatability. And I feel like in this new Spider-Man franchise, ang hirap na ng relatability because it's tied into this larger Marvel
Yeah, yeah.
Cinematic Universe, right? Na Spider-Man doesn't have to commute. Like, diba? Like we never see that in the first few parts of the first film, for example. Or first film he appears in, which is Civil War. Tama ba?
Civil
War.
War. Yeah.
So yun. Wala lang. And I feel like in this franchise, in this new film, which is No Way Home, more than any of the past two Tom Holland films, parang mas na-accentuate yung pagiging niyang leader, yung pagiging niyang relatable, yung pagiging niyang kid
Yeah,
also.
exactly.
And I think that that's so important to his particular Spider-Man kasi parang the other two do look older for their roles, diba?
Yeah.
And parang ang ganda lang na Spider-Man is kind of this character that we grew up with, like Toby was the one we grew up with literally. Andrew's Spider-Man was the one that we could look back at our childhood or our high school fondly.
Yeah.
And then itong yung kay Tom Holland naman is kind of like No Way Home is kind of like an act of letting go of your adolescence and into adulthood. And maybe we'll get into that later. Pero yun, I love the Spider-Man films. I love Spider-Man as a whole. I love the three of them. But Andrew Garfield has a special place in my heart. I'm so sorry. Like,
So
my God.
foggy.
And he's so good in this. Yeah, pero yan.
Yeah, and to Jace's point nga rin na parang, each franchise or each iteration really serves a different purpose and has a different style. And definitely the first the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man series or Sam Raimi Spider-Man series, it's very early 2000s to not have like a romantic angle
Like a
to
love
it.
team.
And how they would it's nice seeing that history na what purpose that they serve, what era they were released in, na parang alam mo yun, you'd see how Mary Jane Watson ni Tobey Maguire is very si Kirsten Dunst is like very alam mo yun,
Damsel in distress.
Yeah.
now comparing to MJ ni Zendaya, who's her
Yes.
own woman, who's
Yeah.
fighting back.
Mhm.
But even Gwen
Even Emma
Stacy,
Stone,
yeah.
exactly.
Mm-mm.
Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy starts that trend na parang you really see that difference of how things were represented, and how much bigger the playground is becoming from just being Spider-Man, and then now you have the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe playground at your disposal, and
Mhm.
whatever you want to put into it, which also of course has its own pros and cons in all of their different ways. So just a brief, I guess, rundown on that side. Any other comments on the history of Spider-Man before we get into the meat of the I mean more into this No Way Home.
Siguro ako quick lang, yung sinabi ni Paul, I think may sinabi siya earlier na I forgot to touch on, which is, ang ganda nga kasi Spider-Man is a quintessential New York film, like
Yeah.
the franchise itself.
Always.
And I feel like yun yung minsan nagkukulang ako dun sa later iterations of it, na it doesn't show enough of New York as a whole, as a playground
Yeah.
for Spider-Man. Pero yun, because nga CGI and everything. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's not necessarily bad. We get some really fucking cool sequences. So yeah, eyeball pa lang magpunta. So, we get some really cool sequences. So, yeah.
Mababawi yung ni Jace diploma.
So sorry.
There's no
Okay.
way to avoid. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that point as well. Na parang, with the bigness of the playground, they were like, oh, let's bring Spider-Man to space. Let's bring
Space.
Spider-Man to Europe. But he doesn't really bask in the New York playground, which I guess it's also a good approach because we have seen the first two Spider-Man live action Spider-Man just be contained in those spaces, and which is also addressed in No Way Home, diba na, oh, you've been to space, you've who are the Avengers even, parang those don't matter,
That part.
didn't matter too much yet in the beginning, and now we have all these things to consider how he fits into the universe. So it's a really nice insight from Paula nga on that note. But I guess let's get into the meat of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, with, of course, Homecoming and Far From Home being the first two in the trilogy, of the first trilogy at least, of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, really bringing it back to high school versus the first two also, and having that Marvel theme of home, I guess, na Marvel Studios proudly puts that theme into it, and the coming of age nga, as Jace mentioned also. Of course, we end Far From Home with the death of Mysterio, and of course, very timely fake news of revealing Peter Parker's identity.
I mean, it wasn't fake.
No, I
He
mean,
really
sorry, I
is
meant
Peter
the
Parker.
circumstances of manipulating that
Okay, yeah.
information and making
Gaslighting
Peter
the
Parker
world.
a villain, which
Yeah.
leads us into somehow the Spider-Verse, live action Spider-Verse. And yun, that's where we start this movie. We don't really get to see Peter again really get into action of just living his New York life, and it's already a big problem na the media's on him, the news spreads so quickly, and parang, is Spider-Man a villain, is Spider-Man a hero, at least to the eyes of New York, or to the eyes of people on the interwebs. So I mean, yun na nga, as Paula mentioned earlier, you really see in this movie na Spider-Man is really a kid with his actions and how he approaches things, na parang, oh, he went agad to Doctor Strange,
Yeah.
and really just tried to magic things up, and Doctor Strange was like, did you appeal, or did you did you send them a letter first? And he was like, no. And that led to the sequence of events of the film. But I guess general thoughts on the whole movie before we get into specific like plot points. Well, for me, just to continue that general discussion, is that it feels impossible that they achieved the impossible with this, having had so much history packed into it, at the same time being its own movie and pushing the story even further, and also exploring a different way of doing Spider-Man, and also representing Spider-Man and the core of the character. It just feels impossible, but they somehow pulled it off. And although I guess there's a sentiment then it's very fan service, but at the same time, not all movies that do fan service are able to pull it off as well
Mhm.
as a self-contained story. Thoughts on this?
Definitely.
Definitely. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead, Jen.
we both said definitely.
I know.
It is definitely. Just quickly, it's definitely a good movie, but honestly, like if you remove like a lot of the nostalgia, I'm not sure where which is impossible, right? Like there's no version of this movie that doesn't have the nostalgia, but like it's hard for me to rank this movie. I almost like if you told me like rank your MCU favorite movies, I almost wouldn't want to include this because it would just be at the top without question because of all of like the other stuff. But like if you told me like, oh, is the story good? I'd be like, does it matter if the story is good? Like I'm almost inclined to say that, which is but it honestly, like you said, like it does a really good job of trying to make it make sense and not just making it about like, oh, surprise, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire here, Like they only appear in like the last hour of the movie, which goes to show that it's really not about them. I guess they were just saving random people in New York while waiting, because like they were just. I guess Toby was just kind of walking around because he was just like a normal person, and Andrew Garfield was probably helping a lot of people. Yeah. So I like. It's hard to. It's like that thing of what makes a movie a good movie. I think it makes me question that, which is really interesting because it's like, shouldn't a good movie just like make you feel good and everything? But there's also that question of like, I wonder what Martin Scorsese thinks of this movie, because like he's like the guy that everyone always talks about with when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it like it's one of those things that I feel like it's evolving. Like movies as a medium, as an art form, are very very young, right? It's only been around for like 100 years or so, right? Compared to like plays and maybe stuff that you would compare movies with, but because it's so young, it's something that evolves constantly, right? And it's like maybe right now it's because it's only in its infancy, people are still experimenting with it, right? So now, like, how can I like, let's say somebody says that I'm not saying naming names, just in general, people might get the idea that you have to exclude this from the conversation of the greatest movies of all time because it has nostalgia factor, right? And that makes you biased when you're reviewing it. But I would disagree and say that I just think it's a different kind of movie that maybe you weren't able to do in the 40s or 50s, but you can't like discount it just because it's an evolved form of a medium that we've had for a long time. And I think it's really cool that Marvel has done, like created essentially this new way of looking at movies, like extremely long form content where it's an entire universe and it's been going on for 10 years and who knows, maybe 20, 30 years, right? And I don't know like how they're going to sustain it, but they're somehow keeping up so far. They have to keep one-upping themselves, and I'm really excited to see how they're going to introduce the other characters. But yeah, that's how I see this movie as being culturally significant, is that it's another change that Marvel has made, that's like the rest of the world, like, okay, how are you going to match this? How are you going to do this new thing that we've done, right? So yeah.
I my ano to that is parang you're right in that sense na parang it's very representative of 2022 cinema in 2022, na parang in 2002 you couldn't have pulled this off. I mean, there wasn't anything you could like pull off on this scale. I'm sure in other scales, pero parang on this level, the Marvel is kind of still changing the game. And also, like, what is cinema at this? We can't answer that on this show, or I mean, on this episode. But like asking that question, nga, and that's a great insight. So Paula, I think, wanted to say something further.
Oh, I mean, similarly, I wanted to say how much Marvel makes use of this concept called shared experiences or shared memories. The way that they frame themselves is that in order to be part of the conversation, you have to watch their films. Otherwise, you are excluded from a general kind of conversation that's happening with the world. There are films that are very niche that only a few people would be very interested in discussing or being a part of. And for other films that do hit the pop culture sphere, it's a one-off thing. You watch it, you discuss it for like a month, like let's say Encanto. You discuss that for like a month or so, and then you're kind of done. What Marvel does is that they're able to pull off like this whole history of content and media that everybody is just constantly a part of. And I think that's, like I mentioned earlier, it is essentially pulling what they do in comics into a film, a visual, audiovisual type of sphere. And like Dren said, it's hard to rank this film because nostalgia is definitely a huge factor into what makes it great. But I think they know that, and they very much lean into that, like, because no other franchise would be able to hit nostalgia the way that this film is able to do.
I
Unless Batman for some reason like is able to do it, but it's
The
not within the
Batverse.
character of Batman. But still very much within the character of all these Spider-Men of the MCU now, and all of these characters. So it's not surprising. I mean, we all are like shocked that they were able to pull it off, definitely. But it's not surprising because it is very much something that we can all like still understand because of our shared memory and shared experience with the franchise. And I think that's what makes this movie great, because no other film would be able to pull this off. No other franchise in the world, I think, could do it as well as this and still have it make sense, because they're pulling not just from the films, they're pulling from comics, the general storyline. They're pulling from the games with like some of the characters and how they act. And I think that's amazing that Marvel is able, and frightening. I just want to put that out. Also frightening that they're able to do all of this and still have us all understand. I think that's essentially the nostalgia of it all, is what makes this movie amazing. Not to be, a pun, but it is genuinely amazing what they've been able to do.
Yeah, and I guess coming off of that, of course, this puts Spider-Man in the MCU in a unique position, because what has been done before and what can you redo, what can you pull, and I think this movie ties that together very well. Now, of course, ang sikat before, Uncle Ben, you'd have the iconic Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, you have Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. How can you top that with new iterations again, diba? Which the Amazing Spider-Man kind of tried to tap into Green Goblin in that sense as well. Pero learning from that experience and coming into No Way Home, paano mo gagawin yun? And there really wasn't no other way but to bring them home and bring them from the multiverse into this universe, at least for the time being. And I guess that brings us to the discussion on the return of the Spider-Man live action Rogues Gallery, which is composed of Green Goblin, Doc Ock, we have Electro, we have Sandman, we have Lizard. So the Sinister Five of this movie. And I think I just saw some concept art na Mysterio was somehow supposed to be here. I don't know what circumstances went into him not being here now, but it would have just been cool, I think, to have a Sinister Six in a sense. But it was still great as it was. I guess you guys want to say something about villains in general.
I think yung sixth ata is Venom sa huli, right? Like,
But the thing is, kasi Marvel doesn't want to call this group of villains the Sinister Six because they have Vulture, who is creating the Sinister Six within federal
And
prison.
Yeah.
So that's why they only had five. Yeah.
So medyo may ganong ganap.
A technicality.
But essentially, parang that kind of represented a version of that, right?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, thoughts on the returning villains. Let's get into that. Of course, let's begin with Electro, I guess, which is was the first I
I
guess
can-
the first villain to be announced out of everyone.
Ah,
Because
okay.
Jamie
Yeah,
Foxx.
okay.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Jamie Foxx announced. I'm not sure if he was actually allowed to, or
No, he
he
was
just
No, he
did
wasn't.
that.
he was not.
He was just really excited to like redeem himself somehow.
Oh.
With the flack that Electro got from the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I mean,
He got
Electro.
that flack. He got that flack because of his wig. That horrible wig. My God. Anyway, sorry.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, so parang yun, coming off of that and getting into this, Electro thoughts. I guess it's just kind of weird how he transformed, which I think we were talking about earlier. But I think they were able to pull it off somehow. Na there's a different type of energy in this
Yeah.
universe.
I mean, they like pretty much they just yada yada it na parang, oh, it's a different universe, so I get a different body because for some reason electricity in this universe is different from electricity in my universe because it's yellow, it's not blue. That makes me a black man instead of a blue man. But sure, I don't know. Like it's kind of one of those things that I really think they just didn't want him to be blue, and they were just like
Yeah.
writers
Fair.
make something, like figure something out, and they were just like the electricity is different, I guess.
I can feel it. The
But
power.
I love that. What I do love is that I think they made that instant connection of like, oh, what if he gets his hands on an arc reactor, which I thought was a really interesting.
Oh yeah,
idea.
same.
That
Same.
was good.
And they gave him the star on his face, which is like the way he looked like in the comics.
In the
which I thought
comics,
was-
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think it was cool to see him get redeemed and see like how he could not be a dubstep villain and just be like a normal guy. I really like I think
Sorry.
like as a villain, yeah, sorry. I think as a villain, like he gets a bad rap because like in Spider-Man, like everyone, like a lot of people think that the Amazing Spider-Man 2 is quote unquote the worst like Spider-Man movie. But honestly, as a villain, it's actually really interesting, and I think that did I just say I think twice? I believe that as a character, he's actually quite interesting, and he's one of the more interesting villains in
I
that
will agree.
he is a person that is extremely lonely and feels like Spider-Man is his best friend, almost like a stalker, right? But it's not a creepy like romantic kind of stalker way where it's like a man feeling like a woman loves him. It's like no, because Spider-Man always, especially Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man always says that like you guys are my best friend, you're my eyes and ears out here, right? And he created this illusion that he was Spider-Man's best friend, similar to I guess The Incredibles with Buddy. Which is why I always think he's like a really interesting character. So it's great that he came back.
Yeah, I mean, I like that Electro's whole thing is just being seen. And that's definitely something that we can all relate to, like that
Yeah.
want to be seen, and that leads us to doing things that we may or may not regret in life. And he definitely regretted the way that he's been working out. The thing with all Spider-Man villains, kasi one is the connection that they all have with Spider-Man. I think that's always a very unique thing about Spider-Man villains. But two, and something that MCU has sorely missed in a lot of their films, is the humanity behind all
Yeah.
of these villains.
Yeah.
That Spider-Man villains always nail. I mean, not the MCU so far, but in the other Spider-Man iterations, you always see you always see the humanity in these people, and that makes you you don't hate them. You never hate any of the Spider-Man villains. Maybe Eddie Brock because he was a jerk, but for villains like Electro, Doc Ock, Green Goblin, and Sandman, you know where they're coming from, and you kind of root for them as well, and you root for Spider-Man to help them. And that's what Spidey inevitably wants to do with any of these villains at the end of the day, which is what we'll probably delve into later. That's his whole thing. So I like that they redeemed, quote unquote, Electro without losing that sense of how and why he became Electro in the first place.
Yeah, and I guess let's move on. I mean, the other villains also featured here is Lizard and Sandman, who don't really have as big a role, I guess, in terms of this film, but it was nice having them back as well. Also, how things ended with these villains nga are all so different na parang si Sandman and si Lizard, parang at the end of their respective movies, natulungan sila ni Spider-Man, di ba? Na parang kind of like get back to normal in some sense. But of course, you have the others like Doc Ock who died to sacrifice himself to save the world after like realizing, what he's done. And of course, Green Goblin who inevitably who killed himself essentially in the first movie as well. So parang the different dynamics. Of course, it's who wants to talk about Doc Ock from the Molina herself. From the Molina herself.
Oh
Yung-
God, I wish we were related. I really hope so that we are somehow related. I mean, I think it's undeniable, and I would assume that everybody here agrees that Doc Ock and Alfred Molina's Doc Ock is probably everybody's favorite Spider-Man villain. Really pushed the story of what Spider-Man can do and what a superhero film looks like. And seeing him happily, I might add, like happily return to this particular role that made a lot of us as children know who he is was fantastic to see. And again, I keep repeating that, but like Octavius's humanity is really what saves him, what saves Spider-Man, what saves New York at the end of the day. And they retained that, like even when he was turning like a little crazy in the beginning. Once he saw that the Peter Parker he was fighting wasn't the Peter Parker that he knew, and it's a different kid, he automatically held back because he has nothing against this particular kid. Why would he hurt him? Whereas a typical villain would just be like rampaging through the city and like hurting people for no other reason. And there are absolutely great moments in this film where I'm getting ahead of myself, but when he speaks to Toby's Peter at the end, and he still refers to him as my boy, it shows you just how much of an actual person and a caring human at that Octavius is. And I think it's a role. While I think all Doc Ock iterations in Spider-Man media have been great, whether in the Into the Spider-Verse film or the games, there's something so like heartwarming about Alfred Molina's Doc Ock that you always want to, again, like I said earlier, root for him and make sure that he's okay too. So, thank you, Tito. Like, great performance. Thank you, Tito.
Close
Tito.
kayo.
Tito
Sa
Al.
reunion ulit, Tito. Magkita-kita tayo.
Yeah, I mean, yun na nga eh. Ang ganda na nag-translate yung soft spot niya for Peter, whichever Peter it may have been. Na, I mean, at the core of Doc Ock, it was like an experiment gone awry lang dun sa, parang, what do you call that, microchip in his neck. And it's nice na that translated back to this one. And ang cool nung nanotech takeover.
That was cool.
Really a cool touch, and really, still very. It's nice how they still have all these Iron Man callbacks at the end of the day. Parang showing how Iron Man really affected the whole universe, whether in the bigger scale or smaller scale. And yun na nga, as Paula was saying, Alfred Molina's Doc Ock, it's really irreplaceable. Na you couldn't really cast anyone else as a live action Doc Ock at this point. Na it's nice to do that. And anyone else on Doc Ock before we continue to the last villain?
Ang dami yung screen time, like, compared to the other villains, which I'm not gonna complain about. Pero like, sobrang natuwa talaga ako. Because, like, I guess the filmmakers knew and how much people loved him. But, wala. Like, in a way, it also shows again to a new generation why he's such a lovable villain. If he even still is a villain. Pero, wala eh. Grabe. People went wild when it was announced that he was coming back. Like, every other villain wouldn't have come back, and I would have been so happy pa rin. Because, wala. Alfred Molina is iba talaga. Although, after this movie, I would, wala. Willem Dafoe just kicked it out of the park talaga again.
Oh my God.
I will still agree that Alfred Molina, in his own movie from back then, he set the standard talaga for every villain, like no matter what the ano talaga, even outside comic books.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, speaking of Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, I mean, wow, this
Oh my God.
performance from
Ah.
this I mean, he was already great to
Ah.
begin with in the first uh 1, 2, 3 movies ish. I mean, 2 and
Yeah,
3,
he keeps coming back as a ghost. Yeah.
he's a ghost, but
Avenge
you know,
me! Sorry.
this was just really like, wow, that commitment to the character and that dedication. And parang it was even like 1,000 times Green Goblin
Yeah.
than it ever was. And that was just like, wow. I want to hear from Jace on this one, especially as an actor himself. What makes this appearance of Green Goblin great in terms of the acting sphere?
I think it's because he's wholly convinced that he's doing the right thing, right? Like it's not that I'm gonna be evil to do the evil thing. It's that this is how it's I'm going to survive, and it's the only way. And any person na ganun mag-isip in general is just terrifying.
Yeah.
But specifically in the context of this film, I think that's why. Because you can kind of reason with Doc Ock, you can kind of reason with everyone else. But
Yeah.
if like a character is beyond reason, parang that's so compelling because you don't know what they're gonna do. And I think for the most part, though, you do kind of know what's going to happen just because of like Marvel imperatives or whatever, except until the very end. Parang nagulat ako that they even went for that. I think what's great about William Dafoe is that he's always on kind of just on the edge of like being over the top. Kaya nakakatakot yung performance. Kahit hindi nakakatakot yung ginagawa niya. Diba? Because if you haven't actually what I like about this film is because if you're a fan of the franchise, it's going to punish you for that. Diba? Like you're going to cry when Andrew Garfield saves that girl. Alam mo yun? Or you're going to be inherently distrustful of Green Goblin, diba? Even if supposedly nag-reform na siya and everything. And I think in weaponizing that against the fandom, parang it serves both as fan service kasi nga, you want to play with like their history, but at the same time, it also kind of always puts you on the edge. And I really think that William Dafoe, like he's on the best parang New York Times best actors list.
Yes.
Like for a reason, because
Yes.
he keeps turning out these performances, whether or not parang he elevates his performance, parang regardless of the quote unquote film.
Yes.
Which
Or
is
the
not to
role
say-
that he has.
which is not to say na I think parang blockbuster films parang have bad acting. That's not true. Like we have plenty of, in my opinion, actually magaling ko dito si Zendaya, magaling ko dito si Andrew Garfield. I love Andrew Garfield here.
Yes.
Magaling ko si Alfred Molina, and actually good ko si Tom Holland. I especially like him in the end.
Yeah.
Like in that last in one of his few last scenes. Like
Yeah.
sobrang like, okay, good job.
An actor. Yeah.
Pero yun, I just think that it's because he's really parang na may kino-conceal siya, but parang he doesn't even know it. And that's kind of terrifying. Yeah.
Just
And
want to
like-
put it out there when he said, "I'm kind of a scientist myself." I literally screamed. I said,
Oh my gosh.
all the rainy memes just like came, and it was amazing.
Tears. Just actual, literal tears. I had to pause like every 5 minutes.
May ano lang ako dun sa sinabi ni Dren earlier. I feel like people have a tendency kasi, I don't know, I just realized this now, ano, na parang people have a tendency to look down on fan service, di ba? And I think that, yeah, there's a point to that. There are a lot of films naman there are a lot of media in general na they are only kind of quote unquote good because they're in reference to something, and originality is such a huge thing right now or whatever, right?
But
But
what
at the
is
same time,
original?
yun nga, but at the same time kasi, like, diba, parang some of the best films we know like directly reference other films, diba?
Yeah.
And that's like a cinematic legacy everywhere, you know, like, diba, parang sina Ari Aster in making like Hereditary and Midsommar, like, and pati sina Robert Eggers, they talk about how a lot of their shots really reference Ingmar Bergman. Ganun.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not saying naman na like these are necessarily the same film. That's obviously those are completely different. Pero I do think that parang there's a circularity in your argument because the nature of film itself kasi is that we're repeating images from the past there. And I think that Spider-Man is just kind of more upfront about that.
Yeah.
It's not passing it off as, I don't think it's passing it off as a form of originality, question mark. I think it's kind of just clearly paying homage to parang all of the people who spent like 20 years of their existence rooting for this one character who's been rebirthed again and again. Wala na, ayan. That's it. I don't know if that made sense, but
Yeah, I mean, yun na nga eh. That should be a whole episode onto itself. Na what is original? What should be original? Like, you know, all people always think we've seen this before, but also at the same time, you know, we've seen everything before. We've heard everything before. Everything is a cycle. It's just a matter of how you present it. And this movie specifically ties all the bows together into a really pretty and nice and heartwarming like gift to the world. Yun, maganda nga yung parang yung mga sinabi mo kanina na films inspiring other films. You really can't avoid it. Like, you know, that whole discussion about Olivia Rodrigo copying other songs or whatever. Parang it's the same concept but in music and in movies, right? Na parang, you know, yun na nga, parang
And
Psycho.
also, like,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was gonna say it's hard to ask for like purely originality from a comic book movie because in and of itself,
Yeah.
it's already
An
a
adaptation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Diba? So I again, like, it just leans into it, and I think I respect the way that it did that, like the way that it's so upfront about it. Anyways, go ahead, Cholo.
Yeah. I was just gonna say quickly, but you know, to Jace's analogies, like how Psycho inspired Halloween, how Halloween inspired Scream, and how Scream inspired the plethora of whatever horror movies of this day, diba? So parang it's just really like everything inspiring everything else and really just making content out of that. And I guess in pros and cons of it also. But anyway, back to Spider-Man before we delve further away from it. Strangely enough, I guess Doctor Strange in the picture, medyo I was kind of expecting more in the Doctor Strange front, but it was kind of just the okay amount, I guess, with everything that you had to tackle on this one. Thoughts on Doctor Strange?
can I just say,
Yeah.
it would have been fixed if Peter had just requested na Mysterio didn't exist.
True.
Like,
Like
If Mysterio didn't exist,
like everyone
they
forgets about
wouldn't have the
Mysterio.
problem.
Yeah, everyone would be
And
like,
it's
okay,
like-
cool.
So it's like that's the one thing that's probably one of the things na like I'm like, why make it? I don't know. I don't know.
because we had to bring everyone back.
Because
Yun nga eh. Pero I'm acting like cinema sins. So like,
Yeah.
and I don't like cinema sins. So,
Oh my God, you know what
So- pero yeah, I'm not gonna. Pero yeah, ayun. That's it for me.
I
I
love
wish-
cinema sins.
I laugh at it so much.
Yeah,
Pero
exactly. That's why.
Yeah. Anyway, go on.
Sorry, I interrupted. Would you finish your thought or?
I know that's all of the thoughts that I have.
Doctor
Yeah.
Strange. We're on the Doctor Strange as we
Yeah.
kind of talk about some other points in this.
Yeah, just to relate quickly to what Jay said, like I really do love CinemaSins because I understand that they're doing it to be annoying. It's like, but yeah, if you did that with every movie, then like, yeah, a lot of movies would just end in 2 minutes, which isn't fun. But yeah, I think they found a really cool way to that point because Doctor Strange is so powerful, right? And he could fix a lot of it. Like one of the things I'm always thinking is, why do you still wear that necklace? Like, why do you wear a replica necklace of the thing that Thanos broke if it doesn't have the time stone inside it? Like, why do you still wear it around your neck? I guess it's just like a cool pendant now. But
Holder lang siya.
yeah, but so they found this. I found this video essay about the cadaver, which is the box that the Strange uses to fix things, and they kind of what they compare it to is that it's basically an older version of the time stone. It can fix stuff, it can reverse stuff, but it takes more steps for Strange to do it. It's like that is the Apple II computer. The box is the Apple II computer, and then the time stone is like the iPhone. It's like the upgraded version of that, which I thought was a really cool way of looking at it, right? And that's essentially what Strange wants to do. Is he just wants to fix it and reverse the spell and send everyone home. But I think they found a really cool way to integrate him, and at the same time, kind of not make his overpoweredness in the movie that obvious.
Yeah.
Right? Like they create this, there's no more time stone, so he can't just reverse time. So he has to use this box, which takes him a few more seconds to reverse time with. And then they make him fight Peter, who of course he doesn't want to kill. So he's, using very weak spells against him, pushes his body out of his his soul out of his body. Somehow his body can still move. I have no idea how that works. Spider sense.
Spidey sense.
Yeah,
Spidey
Spidey
sense,
100%
right? Yeah.
Spidey sense.
So yeah, they find a really cool way to have a battle between Strange and Peter essentially, without either of them really trying to kill the other guy. And then Peter uses math to beat him, which I think is great. So yeah, I agree with you, Chola. I think sakto lang yung involvement with Strange. Because if he was involved more, he would just be too strong, I think.
It would be a Doctor Strange movie by then, and not a Spider-Man film.
So yeah, I mean, coming from that Scooby-Doo stuff, which was a really, really good joke. Scooby-Dooing this stuff. Let's talk about, of course, I guess we already touched upon it, like the return of Toby and Andrew in this movie. I guess before that, the circumstances of being in a Pinoy household while doing so, which was so nice. The details that they had on that scene, na parang may Santo Niño, may may bibingka ba yun or pandesal sa lola ni Ned. I'm not too sure what kind of bread it was, but from the second go around, mas mukha siyang bibingka than pandesal to me. But it was just really like a nice moment na parang, wow, this can now happen. Na parang, we can see this type of representation in the biggest movie in the world of 2021, diba? Parang, it was just really cute. Although I have my qualms about the Tagalog of the Lola.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
And also the way that Filipino Americans pronounce Lola always
Lola?
grates on
Lola?
my nerves talaga. Like,
Pero that's also like, okay, like Filipino American siya. Gets
Yeah,
what?
it's
Like,
film
okay.
representation.
Heard
Ewan ko.
Lula as well.
Yeah. Wait lang, can I just say, may fork and spoon ba na malaki
I
sa
think
wall?
there was. I think there
I
was.
think there was.
I
Yeah.
think there was. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure there was.
Typical Filipino household.
Because like that would be good detail. Anyway.
But also yun nga, yung asking
Ague.
Peter to get
Yung-
the ague. My goodness, I cannot even imagine like the amount of times my grandmother has asked like the tallest person in our house to do the same
Uh-huh.
thing. If you can reach the ague sa gilid ng kisame, you have to do
Kisame.
it for Lola.
What I wanted to look further into was dun sa table, 'di ba na nag-flip siya? Parang gusto ko makita kung may patis ba sila doon or mga ano yung mga condiments na nandoon or mga
Tapos may lace
tawag.
runner pa siya, tapos may glass sa taas, dude.
That was just really like great. Like only I think mga Pinoy would be able to appreciate it as
Yeah,
much.
Definitely.
But that gives us like another level of that fan service in that sense, and they knew somehow na Filipinos would go wild with this and the fact na walang subtitles dun sa sinasabi ng Lola, it's also pretty special na only Filipinos would be able to understand whatever
Yeah.
dialogue that was. yun, parang it's just really fun sequence, and bringing back the two Peter Parkers, Peter 2 and 3 respectively, um, was just okay. So let's head on to that territory. If you don't have any more words to say about Ned's Lola.
Lola.
Well,
Ano
I
lang,
think it was. Oh, go ahead, Prince. Go ahead.
like the moment, ano lang, the moment when Toby showed up, and then Lola looked at him, and I was like, yes, that's it. That is every Filipino right now seeing Toby. That's exactly how every Filipino would react. I am sure of it.
Or generally speaking, how every
They-
Filipino person or general elder would look at a
Yeah,
handsome white male.
exactly. Grabe. At least she got that right. My gosh. Sige, yun lang. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, I mean, like first and foremost, like seeing Ned do magic, I think was more of the
Salamangkero.
surprise for me than
Ah.
like seeing the Peters, because we knew. I mean, come on,
They were
we
gonna
knew
come.
it was gonna happen, but seeing how it came to be, I think was pretty cool. I'm really integrating Ned in the way that this film did, and that anticipation of seeing the suit, but not knowing which of the Spider-Man it would be. I think that like just this whole movie just kept everybody at the edge of their seats.
Yeah.
Whether like we would confirm or negate what we've expected of it. And I think it was really cool how they just didn't beat around the bush. Now once they had Andrew in, they brought Toby in as well, and it was just this explanation of how they got here quick and easy, and that you didn't really need to dwell on it for too long because it was getting into like the action part of the film. But again, yeah, seeing how these two Spider-Men very much like at an older age, than when we first saw them in interacting with teenagers who were new to this type of like, villainy experiences, and seeing how wonderful they were with them, I think was well worth the wait. And again, not too different from how their characters would really respond to that type of situation. So yun. Ang pogi ni Andrew Garfield, yun lang.
Grabe,
yung
parang
when he took off the mask,
He
Lord.
was so hot. He was beautiful. Like, and ang
Looks so
funny
good in
nung
the
scene.
suit. Mm.
Ang funny nung scene na he is trying to convince
Katupunan siya
like
ng
Zendaya.
tinapay.
Yeah.
Oo. So funny.
I do have the thing, though. I just don't have it for bread.
Yeah. Can I just say, I saw that accidentally. Na-spoil ako on YouTube.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
YouTube was a kind of like Twitter you could avoid pa eh, but YouTube algorithms could kill
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. My God. But I'm happy because when I saw him, I was like, he's beautiful. Yeah.
Pogi.
But
When-
specifically for Andrew Spider-Man, parang ang ganda na bringing Andrew back after having so many like critically acclaimed performances in other movies, versus the first time we met Andrew Garfield as like this British actor who only really appeared in mostly British stuff like Doctor Who, for example. Na that's a very, very like specific reference. As to now we have seen him in so many other things, and bringing that experience back into Spider-Man was just really nice. Na parang, the range you would see even further with,
Yeah.
I mean, looks aside, diba parang, and the fact that he gets to continue that journey nga as this Peter Parker, because mas abrupt pa yung pagkatapos niya versus versus Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
Andrew Garfield ended with like parang end credit sequence of whatever Sinister Six thing that was happening in that universe, diba? So parang it's just nice to have that into this movie, brought into this movie, and especially that part where MJ or Michelle Jones Watson, as revealed in this movie, falls and he gets to save her. That was just like, ugh.
Yeah. It was catharsis, definitely, after the events of the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I like how for all of these characters, and this is what I think the MCU has been missing for quite some time also, is that the consequences of their actions, like
Mhm.
they don't really get to experience it.
Mhm.
But Spider-Man is all about consequences. As a character in the
Yes,
comics,
exactly.
he is all
Tama.
about consequences. That I think Toby's Spider-Man in particular really showcased, and Andrew's Spider-Man also touched upon just a little bit. But seeing Andrew Garfield now, and what I really wanted to see moving forward is that they do make an amazing Spider-Man 3, is him as a scarred like shell of a man after the events of Amazing Spider-Man 2, because it clearly like changed how he acted as Spider-Man. I think that's very interesting to see. And I guess same thing with Toby. You know, he went through such hardships in his life, and despite the iffy ending of Spider-Man 3, we know that when he said, "I'm trying to be better," you know that his life still isn't, you know, that fairy tale thing that we still hope for all of the characters that we root for. But he is trying, and he is still, I guess, like facing a lot of the consequences for the stuff that he's done in his life. And I think that's just very interesting to see how they want to make sure that this Peter Parker, you know, doesn't have as much of those consequences in his life, because they know the pain and hurt that they experienced as someone with that same responsibility. So yeah.
Parang they act as his shadow, ano? Like
In a way, yeah.
si Tom
Yeah.
Holland, like parang shadow as in like Carl Jung. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, wala lang. I keep, I agree with what you said, Paula. I feel like for the most part kasi Peter in this particular universe, yung kay Tom Holland, has been largely insulated from the consequences of his actions. I feel, parang there are other people. I mean, di ba nga, even when Doc Ock was going to kill him, parang Tony Stark still saves him from the dead, di ba, with the nanotech. And I feel like by the end, you kind of have a good idea na Peter acknowledges that he is a hero. I think for the longest time, he's been resisting it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what the film really is about. It's really about coming into his own as a hero and kind of, yun nga, losing his naivety and identity in the
Yep.
process. And also like really like literally losing the ones he loves. And kasi di ba parang ano yan, with great power comes great responsibility, but most of the time that responsibility isn't just on you, it's also on the people you love.
Yeah.
And the price of being a hero is really put on the people you love. And
Yep.
wala lang, I really like how this film particularly kind of calcifies that for everyone.
Yes.
Yung gusto ko, by the way, is that nag-reference yung mga Peter Parker, si Peter 2 and 3, sa like current lives nila about like
Yes.
MJ and trying to work it out with si Tobey Maguire, and then si Andrew Garfield is like, you know, like trying to figure things out. And it kind of is nice because they're still trying to figure out who they are outside of their heroism or their
Yes.
being a hero. And parang ang ganda na you kind of see what Peter will be like in the future, but at the same time they're trying desperately to help him, like you said, parang beat that or parang not suffer the same consequences. Yeah. Wala lang.
And to add to that nga, parang slowly coming into phase 4 of MCU, I think that's what the theme of phase 4 kind of is, na
Yeah,
parang
consequences.
really consequences
Yeah.
and dealing
Yes.
as we knew, parang phase 1 to phase 3 was really more of building towards the Infinity Saga and Endgame. It's phase 4 is really dealing with, you know, the impacts on the world, whether it be in, you know, WandaVision or in Loki. Everything na they have come out with so far has dealt with whatever came before, and it's nice that they're dealing in that space na, versus before na parang, sige, let's just keep on going until we defeat Thanos once and for all, right? Now it's like, you know, getting more human and getting to how exactly it affected all these people around them, aside from the Sokovia Accords, I guess.
Yeah.
Yun. So anything else on the two Peters? And
I love them.
I love them.
Their interactions were
Yeah.
grabe
There
lang
were
yun.
so many things that like just to quickly like mention a few things. Like I know that they specifically tried to recreate the Spider-Man meme, again fan service. I know that Tobey Maguire only agreed to join to play Peter Parker, his version of Spider-Man again, if they didn't reveal a lot about what happened to him after Spider-Man
Yeah,
3.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that Andrew Garfield said that as long as Toby's like in, I'm
On
in.
board, yeah.
Yeah, as long as he says yes, I'm saying yes. So there's so much respect between them.
Yeah.
And there's so much respect to the previous works of Sam Raimi and Mark Webb, right? Despite like criticism, whatever, like anything, it's them. It's like you literally took that character and dropped them into this universe. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like they got Marvel-fied by anything, right? It's literally them. It's so fantastic. Even in the script, they're referred to as Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man for Tobey Maguire, or Raimi-verse Spider-Man, and Amazing Spider-Man, or Web-verse Spider-Man for Andrew Garfield. So that's how much respect they put into the work, which is so refreshing because I feel like in a lot of ways it's a lot of like, I want to beat your like box office record. I feel like it's always portrayed to be like tatalo yung different movies, which is so ridiculous. So it's nice to see this super wholesome, and Spider-Man's the perfect hero to do it as well.
Yeah.
So it's such a like perfect storm of things. It's really a miracle that they pulled it off. I think like they were like halfway through principal photography when they finally got the two actors to say
Yeah.
yes, which is again like so many things. So like and there's so much respect between the actors themselves, the Spider-Man as characters. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. I'm gonna rewatch it until I die. It's
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
different Spider-Mans, their personalities, they're despite all being Peter Parker, they're not exactly the same as well. Andrew's Peter really like
Hmm.
looks down on himself a lot. And
Yeah,
I think it was
exactly.
so cool to see how Toby's
Uh-huh.
Peter, who's already like very much matured in life, knows how to respond to that type of self-criticisms. And yeah, I think it was just
You're
great.
amazing. That
You
was
are
great.
Yeah.
amazing.
I
Oh
wanted
my-
to cry, honestly. So
And
much good
speaking
stuff.
of that, of course, we can't not discuss also the impact of people around Peter who brought him up
Mhm.
in his life, and that brings us to Aunt May, which who takes the mantle of Uncle Ben in this MCU version of Spider-Man in a sense, right? Because to avoid nga the repetitive nature of having had seen the impact of Uncle Ben in Peter's life in the Holland iteration, they just kind of um, didn't really get into that territory and really built up this version of Aunt May as a cool Aunt May, but also, parang cool mom, cool tita vibe. And we really didn't expect what happened in this movie, I feel. But at least personally, like I knew they were somehow gonna go there, but didn't really realize that until that moment. Thoughts on this whole of course, parang something had to happen really um to really kick things off, at least emotionally, even further for Peter Parker. Thoughts on this Aunt May, Uncle Ben of this universe discourse, Jace.
Part of me wants to say that she deserved a lot better. Like,
Akala ko he
textually.
deserved that.
She deserved it.
No. No, she deserved better. She deserved better. But at the same time, it's like if you're on screen for 10 minutes in a film and you get paid a lot of money, low effort, I'm in. Alam mo yun? Like she just lost the gig of her life. Alam mo yun? Para, I don't know. I think textually, I think it was necessary for Peter to lose someone. Um, I guess it does make sense na it's Aunt May. Um, pero wala lang. Nawalan kasi siya ng parang father figure in Tony Stark and ng mother figure in Aunt May. So, and wala lang. Wala. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Aunt May deserved better. I wish she had more like dialogue before, like in previous iterations, but at the same time, it's like, no, that's not gonna work. Parang, yeah, I don't know.
Parang I think I read an interview with Marissa Tomei na parang there were different plans discussed about how Aunt May was gonna go from here, but I guess they ended up here. And I mean, with the multiverse open, you never know again, diba? And I think I'm not sure if they're bringing her back for that animated series as Aunt May. So yun. Other thoughts on Aunt May and this one?
Sadness, lots of sadness. That was one of the things that I really didn't expect because a lot of things were spoiled for us, right? Like all of the villains and Doctor Strange and even like arguably the two Spider-Man coming back, a lot of people like really suspected it. So like when that was happening, she even like talks to him after the explosion, and I was like, oh, she's fine. She's not fine. So it was really really sad. Yeah, but like Jay said, I think it kind of had to happen in a sense because it's like a common theme throughout all of the Spider-Man. But
Yeah.
Uncle Ben had already passed away, so it was like okay, like couldn't go to who else can like who what where else will he learn this lesson from, right? And he gets it from Aunt May. She says the line that Stanley, wrote in the comics, right? Like the exact quote he wrote in the comics, which is so beautiful. And there's like a tiny Stanley tribute at the end as well. So I think it really is like the mentors around Peter make him, and maybe Aunt May was like the thing that really like turned him into Spider-Man anymore and not more Peter Parker. So because like she's also in a way like one of the things that ties him to being Peter Parker, right? So now that she's gone, he doesn't live with anyone. He can just be Spider-Man. So yeah.
Yeah.
And the morality of Spider-Man, where he gets that upbringing, yung scene at the feast, diba? That was just really, even if Green Goblin was already like bringing it against her now, it's her fault, something like that. Na parang it's because of her that your morality is like parang there. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's yun nga, because of her that we have this Spider-Man who cares to fix these things for people at the same time, diba? So parang it's just like a nice thing, although it's really sad to see her go because as Jay said nga, we could have seen more pa from that.
I mean, she died protecting Peter,
Mhm.
and I think as any like parental figure or like guardian in life, that's essentially what you want to do for the children in your care.
Especially after the first scene, no, na parang, don't you know that you're the legal guardian in the part na they were interrogating her?
Yeah. So there's that. We always see Aunt May as as like the fun aunt or the cool aunt, but I think there are definitely scenes and moments, and a lot of in all three of the Spider-Man films, she very much cares for Peter in the way that a parent would. The moment that Goblin's glider came, I immediately knew that it was going to happen this way. It harkens back to Goblin's own death, and I think it was just like a really interesting way to put Peter in that position of intense loss and feeling of responsibility, because Peter also felt responsible very much for Goblin's death in Tobey's films. But one thing about Spider-Man is loss. Like that's a constant theme in every iteration of Spider-Man. And I think what's interesting is that in most iterations, we are comforted in the fact that Aunt May will always be there for Peter. In Tobey's verse, in Andrew's verse, Aunt May is still there for Peter in his lowest times. And there's comfort in that. But now that you remove that, his safety net, his most like intense form of remembrance to his parents, to Uncle Ben, and to his humanity, because Aunt May has been there forever. What happens to this Peter Parker now? Which is very interesting, and only what do you call this? Only the PS4 games there to like remove that from him. But at the same time, that's an adult Peter. So seeing this is necessary, I think, for the growth of Tom Holland's character, like Jason Dren says. But ayun nga, it pushes that narrative that being Spider-Man, that responsibility will always be at the cost of losing something that matters to you. Okay, ayun lang. I really love Spider-Man, guys. Like, it's such a
And ultimately, he does lose parang the whole world because nobody knows who he is anymore as Peter Parker, only as Spider-Man. His problem, essentially, the conflict of the movie is solved somehow, but at the expense nga of everyone else getting to live their life normally, which I think really puts him in a great position, or puts this universe in a great position na parang, what is this new status quo for Spider-Man? And also, what kind of Spider-Man are we gonna see in the next series of Spider-Man movies starring Tom Holland, which I think is great because we've already kind of done the high school part, the Avengers part, but the Spider-Man being pure Spider-Man, I think is something that would be very interesting to see here. And of course, that brings about the multiverse in um, the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. Of course, the consequences of this movie being discussed or being parang having a bigger picture parang consequence to the whole universe or the whole multiverse, because of course Doctor Strange continues on in Mom or the Multiverse of Madness, which is the next cinematic feature from the MCU. So thoughts on this, how this ends and where we're going as we head onto the multiverse territory, which has also been opened up on the front of Loki, the series, as well.
Part of me wishes na wala yung credits ng multiverse here. Ay, parang yung trailer ng multiverse. Like, it was the whole trailer, right? Whole trailer. Then.
Yep.
I just wish that they just let, like, Peter swing. Do you get what I mean? Like, just to have that sense of finality for all three of them, technically. Rather than just looking forward to the next thing. But the next thing, I'm very excited about. I guess. Wala lang. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, multiverse is interesting. We saw a bit of a glimpse of it when everything was kind of collapsing and the reset was happening. It just shows us that Marvel has an infinite amount of material to pull from, to create. And while that is terrifying, I mean, as Marvel fans, I'm sure we're all very, very excited for that type of thing. So, yeah, interesting to see what, knowing that Marvel can pull off bringing these characters in from various franchises in a very successful way. I'm very much interested to see how Multiverse of Madness will be able to continue that streak for maybe characters that aren't all in the same, not universe, but like just different characters.
Who owns the rights, basically.
Yeah. Congrats
Pero-
to Marvel for doing that.
Yep.
But pwede ba akong magsabi ng something, by the way? Like,
Go.
pero, sasabihin ko lang siya, pero wala akong sabihin about it. May nag-leak ata ng cast list in the end credits of
Multiverse.
Yeah, Multiverse of Madness.
Ooh.
Do I link it to the chat?
Sure.
Anyway,
To the
Sure.
podcast.
Yeah.
It's gonna be in the description of the podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
But like, wow, like I'm surprised that I'm surprised that there are images of this more than like the list. I haven't checked the whole list, but yeah. Yes, super agree. How Holland, like they have an endless supply of like where to draw from, and that's both exciting, but also like, is that not like terrifying for them?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, no, I was like,
They can literally waste IP. Anyways,
Yeah.
I will go there.
no, but it's great. No, I totally agree. I mean, I just want to add to what you say now. Coming from like working on other movies, basically, being like ahead of the game is terrifying. Having to dictate like how what's gonna work, it is absolutely terrifying because if you make a mistake, it's all on you. Suddenly everyone's staring at you. Just look at the reception of Eternals, right? Like, I honestly like this obviously for maybe another podcast, but I thought it was fine, but because it wasn't great, suddenly everyone's on it and everyone's talking about it. So yeah, it's really scary for them. But in Kevin Feige we trust. The man seems to know what he's doing. He is literally the watcher of the MCU, and he's doing a good job. So yeah.
And I think also to add to this discussion, the fact that Spider-Man as a property is very unique in a sense that it's Sony and Marvel Studios working on it, and that with the popularity of Andrew Garfield in this particular movie, parang having a resurgence, and the internet, how the internet goes these days with all these parang what do you call those parang calls for action, I guess, to studios na it opens up that universe of Spider-Man back again, aside from this Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that possibility of maybe Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man story can continue in that aspect of the universe, and people will understand, hopefully, na parang this is a separate entity than Tom Holland Spider-Man, and they can play around with that on the Sony Spider-Man characters universe, or I think that's what they call it. So yun, parang it's just really interesting to see how that will play out as well on the Sony side of things. And that's something na I think that's been kind of a question mark in the Morbius
Yeah.
series na
Oh God.
which Spider-Man universe is he actually in? Because there are calls to Vulture, there are calls to Raimiverse, there's calls to Amazing Spider-Man. So where does he fit in, diba? And that's not exactly something clear right now. But with the multiverse nga, it makes it kind of easier for them to sift through that territory. And I guess at the end of it is really the Venom after credit sequence as well. With Eddie Brock or Tom Hardy's Venom leaving the symbiote, a part of the symbiote in the MCU. Na who will take the mantle of Venom in this universe, right?
Yeah.
That's a very exciting prospect as well.
But
Maybe
I'm also interested to see who the Spider-Man in Venom's universe
Yeah,
is.
exactly.
and they're
Right?
saying it's
There has
Andrew
to be
Garfield,
one.
right?
I hope so.
That's what they're saying, and I'm just like, wow, he
I was
just
gonna
maybe
say
maybe he's like not doing superhero stuff because like he made mistakes, and that's why he's
Yeah.
not trying to stop him. Yeah.
I was
It's just
gonna
funny
say
because
si
they're
ano,
both like super kalat
Mm.
and like
Mm.
sabog na
Yeah.
characters. That would be great to see. As an
I'd recommend siguro na mas obscure because not a lot of people probably know it. Whether the Weather is Fine, one of the MMFF films, um will be released next week via I Want and KTX. Also, I just watched sa Sundance, Leonore Will Never Die. It's an amazing film. Like genuinely, like one of the recent contemporary greats, in my opinion. If I'll tell you when and where you'll be able to watch it, pero yun yung top recommendations off the top of my head. Also, the new Rina Sawayama,
yes, with
collab.
Charlie.
Yeah, with Charlie. Yeah, damn, that's a good track. Yeah,
Really, really good stuff from Charlie recently.
yeah, super.
Yeah, I've been hearing good stuff about Leonore Will Never Die, and hopefully we get to tap into that sometime. Prince?
Ano lang. Last weekend I was able to watch an exclusive preview of Scream, and now it's out na in cinemas, and it's good. Like Chola can attest to it because I know he's already watched it na. It's a really good requel because it's a remake sequel. It's really fun. Sobrang na-enjoy ako. But yun nga, if you guys like horror, no matter what kind of horror that is, you guys should check it out kasi sobrang fun niya. Everyone is like, wala, it's just really fun.
It's really a great love letter to
Yeah.
not just the original Scream, but the horror genre as it's
Yeah, it
become this day. And a lot of fun pop culture references that I just
Yeah.
really laughed at. And
Yeah.
I was gonna recommend Scream nga din, and I just really I may be biased, and Ghostface is my serial killer bias in the serial killer verse. But yeah, it's really a great requel, as they call it in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's just really so fun, and I just love Scream so much. And just a shout out to Scream 4, which is severely underrated at this point. Then people should watch that more. But Scream 2022 or Scream 5 is really fun as
Yeah.
well.
Yep. And just another thing, not really a recommendation, but something to look forward to. The Philippine women's national football team
Yeah.
qualified for the World Cup. This is such a
Queens.
big deal for
Historic.
Philippine sports talaga. Like, such a big deal. It's such a dream in football history talaga. I stayed up until 1 a.m. watching, covering that. Wala, it's such a, no. And so, but tomorrow, or I guess today, when this episode comes up, they'll have a game against Korea. So, wala lang. They're just gonna play for the cup na. But next year, they're gonna be in Australia and New Zealand for the World Cup. And, wala, it's something to be really excited about. To the point that I'm thinking I wanna go. Like, I wanna see them play. Because
Definitely.
I've seen their games. They're really good. Like, so must in a way they're more disciplined than the men's team, and I've seen them play. I've compared the two of them. So yeah, this is really something to be excited about talaga. So let's cheer on our Malditas whenever they take the pitch.
Making history as Filipinas should in this day and age, right? Dren?
Just super quickly, Peacemaker series is really fun. If you like the James Gunn Suicide Squad, you like it. It's insane. it's crazy, but I think there's a lot of heart behind it as well, which I think is James Gunn's specialty at this point. And the only other thing I'd like to recommend is there's this guy I recently discovered that on in the podcasting world. He was a guest on a podcast I was listening to. His name's Rob Kearney on Instagram. His name is World's Strongest Gay because I think he might be the world's strongest gay person, which is incredible. He's easily one of the 10 strongest men in the world, period. And he makes it a point that he wants to be an openly gay athlete because he wants to encourage, because it's strange because if you look at MMA, if you look at women's sports, I feel like there's a lot of openly out female athletes, but it doesn't work that way for men because for whatever reason, you being an athlete is associated with being masculine, so not a lot of people want to come out, which is ridiculous. And I love that he is making this stand in a sport that is so hyper masculine. It's literally just lifting things strong, and he has a rainbow mohawk. He has unicorn leggings. Like he doesn't care. He wants people to know that he is out and proud and that he can definitely lift you over his head and throw you if he wanted to. So yeah. Go follow him. He's amazing.
Oh, jumping on really quickly because this is sports and I forgot to mention it. Next week is the start of the Beijing Winter Olympics. And it's exciting. We have, figure skating, of course, which is what I am personally looking forward to. But we do have one Filipino representative this year. Again, like any representation for the Philippines in the Winter Olympics, in any winter sports, I think is really cool. So we have Asa Miller, who is an alpine skier, and I think that's so awesome that she's just there in the first place. So go support our athletes and watch the Winter Olympics because it's really fun.
And finally, for me, I want to recommend the movie, The Worst Person in the World. Just really, really good. Thanks, Prince, for
Yes.
providing the provision. But
Why
Yeah,
couldn't you say that when Jace was here? He would have gone wild.
I know, right? Umalis na si Jay, sayang. But at the same time, it's just really like a nice slice of life. It just made me realize, we're all the worst person to ourselves and sometimes to other people. But at the same time, it's okay, and that you don't really know your impact on other people's lives also at the same time. And so it's just really like a good reflective movie, meditative movie of no matter how kalat you think your life is or your decisions are, it's just really part of life, and it puts it into a really great narrative and also really creative as well in some parts of it. It's not just like straight out just a narrative movie. You'll see the stylistic choices they made once you do watch that movie, but really good watch. Especially I feel for people who just feel like they're lost in the world. A lot of us are. And I just got someone messaging me na parang it's so hard to parang make long lasting friends. I was like, sometimes it's just really a matter of perception and how we deal about things. You don't really see the whole picture, but this kind of puts that into perspective, and how it's just really so nice, and one of my definitely favorite 2021 movies. So that's my recommendation aside from Scream 5 and Scream 4 talaga. Ghostface in that movie, Scream 4, is just really the best Ghostface for me. So that is it for our show this week. Thanks for joining us for our Spider-Man Spoiler Fest. Of course, you may listen to all our previous episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you stream your podcasts. We're here on radyo-katipunan 87.9 FM every week. Thanks so much to the RK fam. And we will see you all next time for the next edition of Popcorn, as we are 4 episodes away from our 100th episode of Popcorn as well. So yeah, it's just a great time. So see you guys next time. Thwip thwip. And remember, with great power must also come great responsibility. Can I get an amen? Just kidding.
Amen.
Amen.
Yes.
So yun, thanks and bye.
Bye.
This is your stop for all things pop. Catch our all-around pop culture geek, Chola Sediaren, as he throws in some dose of what's poppin' and what's hot in the pop culture scene here on Popcorn. Munch in with us every Thursdays from 4 to 6, only here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.